All right, another Bob Flounders recommended spot, the Eagle Hotel this week.
Welter, you owe me for this recommendation. You're going to be coming back to this spot. It's like one of the best, very best places to come and grab lunch or dinner in the whole Harrisburg area, East Shore or West Shore. And if you're a wing fan, I would say if it's not the best, it's on a very short list. This is where everyone comes for wings.
The owner was telling me that his dad actually looks a little bit like Joe Paterno, so kind of a fitting spot for us this week.
Sure.
A lot of history. It's been around since like the late 1800s. The current owner has owned it since '76,
right.
And it literally used to be a hotel.
I know. I mean, if it was still a hotel, I might move in here.
Yeah, have a good time.
Yeah.
Spend the night. Why not? Good food, good drinks, good people. Going back to the Minnesota game, It's funny, like there are some plays in sports that dramatically change a narrative, like a Malcolm Butler pick for the Patriots in the Super Bowl, gives Belichick another Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Now, this wasn't a Super Bowl for Penn State, but it was a big game. If they don't make about 5 huge plays in that second half, we're looking at a potentially entirely different season.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a year where they just don't have any room for error. They're going to have to make plays. They were their own worst enemy because they only scored 3 points in the first half. And against Pitt, Michigan, and now Minnesota combined, they have 17 first half points. It's a huge problem. But you could talk about Irv Charles' 80-yard catch,
Yep.
Which is, if you really looked at it, it was very fluky because McSorley had to step up. Charles wasn't even looking back for the ball until the last second. But I thought, out of all those things that happened, for me, it was another unlikely player. It was Jordan Smith's end zone interception because Irv Charles got them back in the game, but they won't win that game if Minnesota gets points on that possession. And it was Jordan Smith in the game because Christian Campbell got hurt and Amani Oruwariye.
The hardest name to say on the team, maybe in all college sports.
Jordan Smith was not really in Penn State's plans this year on defense. Made a great play in the end zone, and that set up everything, including McSorley's late drive, which somebody referenced last week on the show. I'm not sure who it was. And then Saquon Barkley winning in overtime. But yeah, it was a sequence of events, and Penn State needed everyone to win the game.
Now, it's a great game. It's a great win. It's huge for the team, huge for the program, huge for Franklin. But can they sustain it? Because so much of the big plays were somewhat flukely, or they're just McSorley playing hero ball.
Well, that's what Trace can do.
Yeah.
If he has enough time, he can extend plays with his feet, and that's what you need when your offensive line is still trying to figure it out. He did it against Georgia. He did it against Pitt in the second half. And that's what he's going to have to do. It's not going to be Barkley that's going to win games for Penn State, really. I mean, he finished the game, but it's really what McSorley's going to be able to do, throwing the ball because they're stacking the line of scrimmage. But yeah, it was really a very interesting game. And the one thing that I took from James's press conference was he said they put a lot of effort into that win. It was a physical game, and they celebrated like they had won the Big Ten title afterward.
Playing.
And you just wonder when you spend that kind of emotion and you play at noon the next week, you can come out a little flat because it's just hard to replicate that kind of emotion in that kind of environment.
And this is a huge game against Maryland, arguably a bigger game because Maryland's a team that's trying to be a rival to Penn State. They got a Michigan defensive coordinator, DJ Durkin, as their head coach. They got the number 17 recruiting class next season. And for Penn State to get back to the top, Maryland cannot be a rival. Maryland cannot be a team that's going to take some of Penn State's players. It just can't happen.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting game. One of the games that you know when there's some uncertainty regarding a Penn State game when they open as the favorite by a field goal and the line immediately moves. Maryland's a slight favorite as we talk about this. So there's really some differences of opinion on this game, and I think it's also worth pointing out that James Franklin's teams have really had their hands full with Maryland. And this is, I think, the best Maryland team James is going to see. Mm-hmm. They lost by 1 in 2014 at home, and they won in Baltimore by 1 last year. Two games that were decided very late, and I think it's going to be a challenge, very much of a challenge for Penn State on Saturday.
We've been talking about close games all year. Close games kind of potentially defining the season. Should we pause? We should probably check that.
No, we got it.
That's okay.
It's good.
Technical difficulties. We'll leave this unedited in the podcast,
Yeah.
a little behind the scenes. We talked all year about close games potentially defining the season. Yeah. They lose one to Pitt. They win one last week. Do you think this is a team that's learning how to win them and that they're actually going to be able to say at the end of the year that this was a progress season?
Well, I would say this. I would say when you look at the rest of the schedule, I mean, I think there's a really good chance, Pat, that they'll be in 3 or 4 or more close games.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can really judge how Penn State is until the end of the year. But I do feel like this was going to be the kind of games that they were going to be in the majority of the Big Ten season just because of the defense and the injuries. I don't think that'll change. You look at the Maryland game. You look at, there's a road date at Indiana. There's a road date at Rutgers that I think is not as going to be, it won't be as easy as you think. They get Iowa at home. Iowa is still trying to figure it out, even Michigan State. So, yeah, they're gonna be in some close games. They're gonna be in some fourth quarter games, and I think it's to their advantage that they have a dual threat quarterback because you can't overstate it. His ability, Christian Hackenberg was a second round pick, but Christian Hackenberg was not going to be able to get out of trouble the way Trace did against Minnesota. And that's something that's different about the college game. Trace can help out his offensive line where Christian couldn't.
Yeah, on one hand, it looks like the way he plays seems unsustainable, but on the other hand, so much of college football is your quarterback just going out and making plays. But you wonder, they got to get Saquon Barkley going somehow.
Yeah.
But so far, through 4 games, they cannot run the ball, and they keep running that read option. I never thought I would hate it, but I hate the read option.
Hey, it's 8 and 9 man fronts. They've tried. If you noticed, I think they've been. There's some things you can wonder about, but this offensive coordinator is trying to get him involved as a receiver.
Yeah.
They didn't really do that last year. Now that everyone knows how dangerous Saquon is, they're gonna do everything they can to keep him from beating them. And he only got loose twice against Minnesota. He got loose once in the first half, and he got loose once when the game was decided. But as far as the read option, I would tell people this: they're like 2 backs. Why aren't they running out of the eye? Look, it's not happening. Penn State does not have a fullback. They do not have a tight end who can block. Mike Gesicki can't block.
Yeah.
They don't really have the personnel to run the offense that people want to see on third down that might help Saquon out. Now that's the thing that they're going to have to address in the off season. If they're going to run this offense, then there's going to be a delayed play between the quarterback and running back on third and short. The defense knows it's coming. I would say that it is a recipe to fail moving forward, especially against an athletic defense. And I don't know what the answer is right now, but you're right. It's not that play.
Now that speaks to coaches making adjustments.
Yeah.
And I think Franklin and his staff deserve some credit, A, for the defense, the job Brent Pry did last week, B, for what they've done at halftimes. The third part is adjusting that read option and coming out with faster starts, which was a huge theme at the Tuesday press conference this week. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm actually buying what James is selling on the chaos coaching period and how he's going to just try and challenge the team. I just think it starts with it's really hard to start fast.
Sure.
When you're not getting a lot of turnovers on defense or special teams and you're not converting third downs. That leaves only one option, and then that's an explosive play. And I think it takes a little while for Coach Moorhead to figure out what's working, and you see that happen in the second half when he makes some adjustments. One thing I would say, though, is I do like the fact, even though fans might not, that they continue to go deep. It doesn't always work out, but that's the way you start fast. They're going to need explosive plays in the passing game because defenses, and this Maryland defense is going to be one of them, they're just going to say Saquon. I mean, Maryland shut him down last year.
Yeah.
He had 65 yards on 20 carries. He fumbled once or twice. They're just not going to let him beat him. So beat them. So a fast start to me means that they're going to hit on one of those 2 plays in the passing game.
Let's do our weekly heat check on the seat of Franklin.
Yeah.
Cooled off a little bit.
Sure.
Should it be?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say had they lost, it could have been maybe a 7.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of the coaching world. If you just look at other spots, there are bigger name coaches in more desperate shape. Yeah, I mean, that was a game he had to have. I would say this game is another one of those games, but they were not very good in close games in the Big Ten under him, and that's Minnesota is one. If they can win this game, I think if they do win it, it's going to be close. I think you're going to see the Heat way off because the expectation I think was at the start of the season that they'd probably be a 7, 6, or 8 win team. Mm-hmm. But as long as you win the games you're supposed to win, I think that's progress in the minds of the administration. So Minnesota was a game I think they were expected to win. They found a way to win it, even though it was ugly. This is another game where you don't want to lose it, but if you do win it, that's win number 4, and you're 2 away from going to a bowl game.
Now, this was the game last year where they actually became bowl eligible, and this is a game, again, that is huge for A, getting to a bowl, because we look at that schedule, it keeps looking harder and harder now that Indiana is good, and then B, keeping the recruiting momentum going, because Maryland's a team in their backyard that could steal players. So this is a pretty big heat check game for overall for the whole program.
Means a lot to Maryland, too. So, I mean, I'm sure they're going to approach it that way. DJ Durkin's trying to establish an identity there. He's off to a good start. If you look at their schedule, they've played some teams that aren't very good, but they've looked good almost in all 4 games. They beat Central Florida on the road, and that's not an awful team. They were extended in overtime. They won a close game. I think that speaks to the growth of the Maryland team. The other thing is Maryland has some athletes that can cause Penn State trouble at different levels of the game. They have a quarterback who's a dual threat. They have a dynamic return player and a dynamic corner. And they have a running back who ran for 200 yards last week on only 7 carries. So Penn State's had issues stopping the run.
That's quite an average.
And you can pretty much, and Maryland's an up-tempo team, so it's going to be, I think it's going to be a very interesting game.
It's a similar kind of storyline to the Minnesota game where you're like, okay, if they get behind to this team that can run the ball and score points, it could be difficult to come back. And they know this team. They know Perry Hills from last year. He's kind of just your average running quarterback, but he adds another element to that offense. They got like 4 different running backs, and they're scoring 40 points a game.
Yeah. I think they're improved defensively, too. They have some athletes. DJ's got a defensive background. And all he has to do is watch last year's Maryland-Penn State game. They had some success stopping Saquon. Saquon, I would describe his season this year as boom or bust, whereas last year, I think he more consistently was able to get 5-6 yards at a time or more big runs. Now it's, I give him credit because he's a young player and he's been patient. He hasn't looked discouraged. And, if he carries the ball 20 times, he might not get free on 17 of those carries, but when he does get free, he's become the player that you saw last year. But that's the challenge, is how many times in the game can Moorhead and the offensive line free him up? If he gets to the second level, anything can happen.
Sure.
But it's happened very, very infrequently. Even the Pitt game, when he scored 5 touchdowns, only one of those was an explosive play. It was the pass reception down the left side. Everything else was a short run.
I think it's kind of a revelation that they got to play from a new receiver. It's been a problem for the last 2 years, just guys getting separation, receivers other than Chris Godwin make a play. And I think we know kind of the book on Godwin. He's good at contested catches. He can get deep, but he's not a truly explosive receiver. And Irvin Charles is a big dude running out there.
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at college football, there's so much speed in the secondary that Irv Charles, that 80-yard touchdown, that was basically a contested catch. He wasn't. You just don't see wideouts running by secondaries anymore.
Yeah.
I think, as a matter of fact, the most wide open guy in the game was Mike Gesicki when he got behind the the Minnesota defense, and he still couldn't score, I don't think. I think they stopped him.
Yep, by the 10-yard line.
Yeah, so they do need somebody other than Godwin to make some plays. Charles could be that guy. One catch, 80 yards for a touchdown is great. He was also the guy that was on the field in the Pitt game, and I don't know that he ran the right route on the interception. I'm not sure. Somebody did, and it might have been him. I think that he's still kind of a guy that hasn't maybe successfully mastered the route tree. So they're supposed to get Saeed Blacknall back this week. They haven't had him since Kent State. And one guy I thought that could really help them this year, especially in space, Pat, was Brandon Polk, but you haven't seen him a lot this year. And James, who doesn't talk about injuries, said he has been dealing with an injury, and I think that's another guy that they really miss that kind of gets overlooked.
I want to give a little credit to the defense.
Sure.
Because that was a pretty big performance last week. 22 tackles from Marcus Allen. He basically was playing linebacker. Oh, looks like the food is finally here. This is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This is a quality crab cake right here. Now, I know Maryland is known for crab cakes, but Harrisburg can make a pretty good crab cake, too.
I see what you did there, Pat.
That's tying it all together there.
Now I know why you're making all that money.
I absolutely love crab cakes. When I lived in Florida, loved them. There's something a little bit different about the crab cakes up here. I once, in the Baltimore airport, I think on the way to the bowl game last year, paid like $30 for a crab cake.
Well, there's some other spots we can get you some more crab cakes.
Okay.
Don't worry. We'll keep feeding you.
What do you say? You want to pick the game?
Yeah, did you? You wanted to credit the defense, I think, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I don't want you to lose your train of thought.
Let's go back to that. The crab cake distracted me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on a week where we're picking linebackers basically out of the stadium, Marcus Allen steps up, Cam Brown steps up, and they stop a team that's known for running the ball, and that's going to be huge again this week when you've got a team that rushed for 241 yards against them last season.
Yeah, Marcus Allen had 22 tackles, 8 solos, and talk about injuries. Another guy that didn't play the game that hurt Penn State, believe it or not, was Malik Golden. Didn't play. They had to start Troy Apke. I think there's a pretty significant drop off there. Cam Brown, for a guy that's undersized, I thought really hung in there. They had to move Manny Bone, the middle linebacker, a position he'd never played. And Manny's an athlete. And they actually they made some stops late in regulation and in overtime. Even though they gave up some yards, they got better late in the game. I thought that was key. And once again, I thought that the most unsung player in the game with the play was Jordan Smith. That was a huge play in the game. I thought of all the things that Penn State did in the second half to get that win, that really might have been the biggest play, because if they get points on that possession in the fourth quarter, I think Penn State would lose the game.
Do you think he can be a guy that can step up going forward? He seems like a leader. Everything you hear about him, that he's taking this opportunity, making the most of it, and he's going to need to, because we don't know how long Christian Campbell's out.
Yeah. I think that he's probably earned some more snaps, and they might need to use him more if those corners miss extended time. But when you're an upperclassman and you're a backup, it's usually for a reason.
Sure.
So I give him a lot of credit. I mean, that was not a great throw by the Minnesota quarterback. He certainly made the play. But I think that Penn State, in an ideal setup, you would see them play the 4 corners that they have. I think he's kind of the 5th corner. And they have to get healthy at linebacker soon. Cabinda's going to miss another game, it looks like. Brandon Smith's coming back. But yeah, that's no way to line up and play in the Big Ten when you're missing your 3 or 4 best linebackers.
Let's pick the game.
Yep.
I might need some help this week. I talked to this guy. I've been pretty good so far this season. I talked to this guy up at the tailgate, Aldo from New Jersey.
Sure.
He nailed it with a push. And I don't know, I might need to bring him back in, because this is a tough line. I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. It is, as we talk about it, I think it's either a pick'em or Maryland's a slight favorite. Who knows what's going to happen on game day? The total is 58. That fluctuates a little bit too as well. Maryland's going to win this game.
Really?
30
Okay.
to 23. I think that Penn State put a lot of emotion into that win last week, and it might show up this week. I also think that, like I said at the start, this is the best Maryland team that Penn State has faced. If Penn State was completely healthy on defense, I think that maybe they might be the better team. They're not. And I do think that they're playing with fire with these slow starts. The only thing would change is if they can score in the first half. But if they get behind this team, I think this is a little bit better team than people realize, and I think it'll be an entertaining game. You'll see some interesting plays, but I have Maryland winning at 30 to 23.
I'm worried about the emotion from last week's game and Penn State looking at this as big of a game as Maryland is right now, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt at home again. Same score as last year, 31 to 30. I don't even know what that's going to be in whatever line this ends up being, but I'm going to give Penn State the benefit of the doubt again at home. Trace McSorley learn how to win close games.
You homer.
You think?
No, I'm just kidding. No, it could easily go that way.